Friday arrives, and something lifts. Not dramatically. Not the way it looked in movies when you were younger, when the weekend meant something limitless. But something does shift. A mild, reliable loosening somewhere behind your sternum. A release of a pressure you'd been so accustomed to that you stopped noticing it was there. You make plans, or you make no plans, and either way, the next 2 days belong to you, in a way the previous 5 didn't. You eat dinner without checking the time. You stay up a little later than you should. You exist, briefly, without the low-grade administrative hum of obligation running underneath everything. And then Sunday evening arrives. Maybe it starts around 4 p.m. Maybe it starts earlier than that, which means it effectively ate Sunday too, which means you're working with considerably less than 2 days of actual weekend. The light changes, or you notice the light changing. And something contracts. Not a thought exactly, more like a weather shift in your chest. The week assembles itself in your mind. The inbox, the meeting you've been rescheduling, the thing you said you'd have done by Wednesday, the specific person whose name in your notifications produces a response that is technically mild, but costs more than it should. The weekend isn't over yet, but you are, in any meaningful sense, already there. Most people call this Sunday dread and treat it as a personality quirk, a mild joke, a thing to commiserate about over a shared meme on a Sunday night at 9 p.m. while already in bed. It is not a personality quirk. Here's what nobody actually asks about the asymmetry. Why the dread of Monday hits harder than the relief of Friday? The brain does not process anticipation and relief symmetrically. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying how people experience gains versus losses, and what he found was direct. The psychological weight of a negative event is roughly twice as powerful as the equivalent positive one. Not because you're wired wrong, because you are wired for survival. And in a survival context, threats require faster, more intense processing than rewards. The promotion of missing a threat was more urgent, historically, than the optimization of enjoying a good afternoon. That system is still running. It just no longer has predators to assign it to. So it assigns it to Monday. That's why you can finish a perfectly acceptable Friday, feel the release, and still find yourself somewhere around 6 p.m. Sunday, already bracing. The weekend didn't shrink. Your brain shifted mode. This is the first piece, but it's not the whole picture. And this is where it gets more complicated. The dread is not really about Monday. Monday is a container. What lives inside the container varies. The work itself, the particular dynamic with a particular person, the gap between what you thought your professional life would look like by now and what it actually looks like. The cumulative weight of days that feel necessary, but not quite chosen. The dread arrives on Sunday because Sunday is the last moment before contact, and the mind, given a few hours of quiet and no immediate demands, will use that quiet to prepare for what's coming. It rehearses the week. It maps the difficult conversations. It calculates the energy cost of Tuesday before Tuesday has arrived. This is not anxiety misfiring. This is your threat detection system doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is that it cannot distinguish between a genuine threat and a standing appointment. But here's the part most people miss entirely. The Friday relief and the Sunday dread are not opposite ends of the same experience. They are measuring different things. Friday measures the removal of constraint. Sunday measures the approach of something you have a complicated relationship with. And the reason the dread is louder than the relief is not because your job is worse than your weekend is good. It's because the brain weights approaching negatives more heavily than receding positives, regardless of their actual magnitude. You could have a genuinely good weekend and still feel the Sunday contraction arrive on schedule. The quality of Saturday is almost irrelevant. The dread is structural, not proportional. And there's something worth naming here that almost never gets said out loud. The Sunday dread is a weekly report on how much of your life feels chosen versus how much feels managed. People who dread Monday most acutely are rarely people who hate their jobs in a simple, direct way. They are more often people who feel the gap between what they're doing and what they thought they'd be doing, between how they spend most of their waking hours and what those hours feel like from the inside. The dread is not irrational. It is precise. It knows exactly what Monday contains. It knows the specific weight of the specific week. And it is registering with considerable accuracy that a significant portion of your weekly existence is something you endure rather than inhabit. That distinction, enduring versus inhabiting, is the one the dread is trying to make you look at. The Friday relief, by contrast, asks nothing of you. It requires no preparation. It simply arrives and then, quickly, always more quickly than expected, it ends. The asymmetry isn't a glitch, it's the design. But that doesn't mean you have to live inside it without examining what it's actually telling you. That is worth taking seriously. Not as a crisis, as information. So here is what this actually makes you. You're not someone who can't handle responsibility, or who is too sensitive for the working world, or who simply needs a better attitude about Mondays. You're someone whose nervous system is giving you an honest weekly accounting of the distance between where you are and where you feel you should be. The dread is not the problem. The dread is the measurement. The question is whether you're using the measurement for anything, or whether you're absorbing it every Sunday and then carrying it, unexamined, into another week that produces the same report 7 days later. But here's the uncomfortable part, and this is worth sitting with. There is a version of Sunday dread that is a legitimate signal pointing at something that needs to change. And there is a version that has become a ritual, a weekly emotional event that is, at this point, more habit than information. The dread arrives because it always arrives. You've stopped asking what it's actually pointing at. You've gotten quite good at carrying it from Sunday into Monday, and somewhere around Tuesday it dissipates, and you forget to ask the question, until it returns again the following Sunday, on schedule, unchanged. The dread, in this version, is not a compass. It is a weather pattern you've learned to live inside. And here is the hardest part to sit with. Friday feels smaller than Monday feels heavy because relief is always shorter than dread. The release from constraint has a ceiling. The weekend has a known length, a known end, a known cost attached to it already as it begins. The dread has no ceiling. It contains everything the week might hold. And you cannot fully recover on Sunday because by late afternoon, you've already left. If the Sunday dread has graduated from weekly discomfort into something that compresses the weekend, makes it hard to be present in, turns Sunday into a waiting room, that's worth exploring with someone trained to help. Not because the dread is wrong, because some patterns are worth interrupting before they become the only way you know how to move through a week. What would you do differently with your Sunday evenings if the dread didn't arrive? Not the whole week, just Sunday. The question is simpler than it looks, and the answer usually says something true.